How did my own daughter and her husband go from laughing at me in the family chat to pounding at my door, desperate and red-faced, as I filmed their apologies for the world to see? When your family treats you like a joke, sometimes the only answer is to show just how much they depended on the boring old man they pushed aside. This is how canceling a few payments and pressing record changed everything for them, and for me. Frank Dietrich sat in his suburban home office, surrounded by neat stacks of bank statements and family photos that seemed to mock him from their frames. At 62, the retired regional bank manager had spent the last 5 years watching his carefully ordered world crumble piece by piece. Not from any financial disaster or health crisis, but from something far more insidious, the slow, steady erosion of respect from the very people he'd sacrificed everything to support. The December afternoon light filtered through his window as Frank scrolled through his phone, reviewing the automatic payments scheduled for the next day. Rent for Alyssa and Trevor's downtown apartment, $2,800. Trevor's car payment, $485. Their joint car insurance, $340. Cell phone family plan, $180. The numbers blurred together, a monthly hemorrhage of $4,200 that had become as routine as breathing. His phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat titled Dietrich Family Updates. Frank's stomach tightened as he opened it, already bracing himself for whatever passive-aggressive comment his daughter Alyssa had crafted this time. The message appeared in stark black text. "Don't you dare come for Christmas. We don't want to see you." Frank stared at the screen, his coffee growing cold in his hand. 32 years old, and his daughter still had the capacity to gut him with a single sentence. But it wasn't just the words, it was what came next. Trevor's laughing emoji appeared first, followed by another from Eleanor, his ex-wife. Even his distant son Mason, usually neutral in family drama, had added a crying, laughing emoji. The group chat exploded with follow-up messages. Trevor. Finally someone said it. Eleanor. Maybe we can have a peaceful holiday for once. Alyssa. I'm so tired of walking on eggshells around him. Trevor. The guy just drains the energy from the room. Remember last year? Frank's hands trembled slightly as he read each message. Last year, when he'd quietly paid for their entire Christmas dinner, their gifts, and even covered Trevor's gambling debt from his investment in cryptocurrency. The same Christmas where Trevor had openly mocked Frank's boomer investment advice while Eleanor nodded along, desperate to stay in her daughter's good graces. He closed the chat app without responding. The silence in his house felt deafening, broken only by the gentle hum of his computer and the distant sound of neighborhood children playing outside. Frank walked to his kitchen, mechanically washing his coffee mug while his mind processed what had just happened. This wasn't the first time they'd humiliated him, but it was the first time they'd done it so publicly, so deliberately. The family chat included not just immediate family, but also cousins, aunts, and uncles. People who would now see him as the family pariah, the unwanted burden everyone had to tolerate. Back in his office, Frank opened his laptop and navigated to his online banking portal. The familiar interface greeted him with its neat rows of scheduled payments, automatic transfers, and account balances. His eyes lingered on a folder in his filing cabinet labeled Family Support Agreements, documents he'd meticulously maintained over the years, tracking every loan, every payment, every financial lifeline he'd thrown to his drowning daughter and her husband. Frank's phone buzzed again, another bank notification reminding him of tomorrow's automatic transfers. His finger hovered over the notification, and for the first time in years, a different kind of smile crossed his face. Not the resigned, defeated expression that had become his default, but something sharper, more calculating. He pulled out the family support folder and spread the documents across his desk. Lease agreements, where he was listed as the guarantor. Insurance policies in his name. Car loan documents with his signature as the co-signer. Years of bank transfers, each one documented with the careful precision of a man who'd spent decades in financial services. At Alyssa and Trevor's apartment across town, the couple was already planning their Christmas celebration. Alyssa lounged on their leather sectional, purchased with Frank's credit card, while Trevor browsed expensive restaurants on his phone. I can't believe we finally told him, Alyssa said, painting her nails a festive red. I feel so much lighter already. Trevor grinned, not looking up from his phone. Best Christmas present we could give ourselves. No more listening to his lectures about fiscal responsibility and planning for the future. God, the man's insufferable. And no more of those awkward silences where he just stares at us like we owe him something, Alyssa added. I mean, what does he expect? A medal for doing what fathers are supposed to do? They'd grown comfortable in their contempt, these two. Comfortable enough to broadcast it to the entire family. Secure in the knowledge that Frank would absorb their cruelty with his usual quiet dignity. After all, he always had before. Trevor's phone rang. His boss at the real estate office. probably calling about the Henderson property deal. As Trevor chatted enthusiastically about commission projections and market trends, Alyssa scrolled through social media, already composing Instagram stories about their drama-free Christmas plans. Neither of them noticed the absence of Frank's usual evening text asking about their day, or the fact that their father and father-in-law had gone completely silent after their public humiliation. They were too busy celebrating their cruelty to recognize the calm before the storm. Back in his suburban home, Frank methodically organized his documents, cross-referencing account numbers and payment schedules. His phone remained face down on his desk, the family chat notifications piling up unread. But Frank wasn't ignoring his family anymore. He was studying them, the way a chess master studies the board before making the move that changes everything. The folder labeled Family Support Agreements lay open beside his laptop, and for the first time in years, Frank Dietrich was no longer the victim of his own generosity. The pattern hadn't started overnight. As Frank sat in his office, surrounded by years of financial records, he could trace the exact evolution of his daughter's entitlement like a pathologist examining a disease. It began innocently enough when Alyssa was 22, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and dreams bigger than her entry-level salary could support. Frank remembered the phone call, his little girl crying about student loans and rent deposits, afraid she'd have to move back home and look like a failure to her friends. "Just this once, Dad," she'd promised. "I'll pay you back as soon as I get established." Frank had written the check for $8,000 without hesitation. He was still married to Eleanor then, still believing that family meant something beyond transactions and convenience. Eleanor had worried about enabling their daughter, but Frank's response was always the same. "She's our child. This is what parents do." The receipts told the story his memory had dulled over time. College graduation party, $3,200. First apartment security deposit and furniture, $12,000. Car down payment when her old college clunker finally gave out, $6,500. Every expense carefully logged in Frank's meticulous handwriting, each one paired with Alyssa's tearful thanks and promises to make it up to him someday. Then Trevor Cooper entered the picture. Frank pulled out a manila folder labeled Trevor Integration Timeline, a phrase that now seemed grimly prophetic. He'd started the folder during their engagement, initially as a way to track wedding expenses, but later as something closer to an investigation file. Trevor's first impression on the family had been carefully calculated charm. The junior real estate agent arrived at family dinners with flowers for Eleanor, compliments for Frank's investment knowledge, and an easy smile that made everyone want to like him. He'd grown up in a working-class family, he explained, and was blown away by the Dietrich family's generosity and success. "Your daughter's so lucky to have a father like you, Mr. Dietrich," Trevor had said during their first Christmas together. "My dad split when I was 12. I never had that kind of support system." Frank had felt genuinely moved by Trevor's apparent vulnerability. Here was a young man who understood the value of family, who appreciated what Frank provided instead of taking it for granted. When Trevor asked Frank's permission to marry Alyssa, he'd done it with tears in his eyes, promising to take care of her the way you taught me a man should. The wedding had cost Frank $34,000. The receipts were all there: venue deposit, catering, flowers, photography, Alyssa's dress, Trevor's tuxedo rental, even the honeymoon to Santorini. Frank had dipped into his retirement savings, telling himself it was an investment in his daughter's happiness. But something had shifted after the wedding. The grateful phone calls became demanding texts. The tearful requests became entitled expectations. When Alyssa and Trevor needed a larger apartment, there was no discussion about whether Frank could afford the upgraded rent, only an assumption that he would provide it. Frank opened his laptop and scrolled through years of text messages, screenshots he'd saved in a folder labeled Communication History. The evolution was stark. Year 1, dating. "Mr. Dietrich, I can't thank you enough for helping with Alyssa's car payment. You're incredible." Year 2, engaged. "Hey Frank, Alyssa's stressed about the wedding costs. Can you handle the catering deposit? We'll figure out how to pay you back later." Year 3, married. "Need you to cover our rent this month. Trevor's commission got delayed." Year 4, established pattern. "Insurance is due tomorrow. Handle it." Year 5, recent. "Your payment was late. We almost got evicted. Get your act together." The final message had arrived just last week. Frank stared at it now, remembering how his hands had shaken when he read it. His own daughter, speaking to him like he was an incompetent employee rather than the man who'd funded her entire adult life. Eleanor had been no help during this transformation. After their divorce 3 years ago, she'd moved into a modest condo and seemed determined to win Alyssa's approval at any cost. When Frank tried to discuss setting boundaries with their daughter, Eleanor would wave him off. They're young, Frank. They're still figuring things out. Young? She's 32, Eleanor. Trevor's 34. You're being dramatic, so what if they need help? We can afford it. But Eleanor wasn't the one writing the checks. She contributed nothing to Alyssa and Trevor's support system while positioning herself as the cool parent who didn't lecture about responsibility or consequences. It was a comfortable position that let her maintain her relationship with their daughter, while Frank absorbed all the resentment that came with being the family ATM. The breaking point should have come 6 months ago, at Mason's birthday dinner. Frank's son had flown in from Seattle for a rare family gathering at the local community center. Mason, 27 and quietly successful as a software engineer, had always been different from his sister, self-sufficient, thoughtful, appreciative of help but never demanding it. During dinner, Trevor had been holding court about his latest investment opportunity, some cryptocurrency scheme that required a $15,000 initial investment. He'd looked directly at Frank while explaining how generational wealth was built through bold moves and calculated risks. The problem with your generation, Frank, Trevor had said, cutting his steak with theatrical precision, is you're too conservative. You're sitting on all this money, earning, 3% in savings accounts? Meanwhile, Alyssa and I could triple that investment in 6 months. Frank had quietly mentioned that he'd heard similar promises about Trevor's previous cryptocurrency ventures, the ones that had cost him $8,000 in emergency bailouts, when they inevitably collapsed. The table had gone silent. Alyssa's face had flushed red, but not with embarrassment at her husband's behavior, with anger at her father's rudeness. Dad, Trevor's just trying to help you understand modern investing, she'd snapped. Maybe if you listened instead of always being so negative. Eleanor had immediately jumped in to smooth things over, suggesting they change the subject to something more pleasant. Mason had stared at his plate, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to get involved in family drama. But Trevor hadn't been finished. Look, Frank, I get it. When you're older, you get risk-averse. But Alyssa and I are in our prime earning years. We can handle some volatility for the chance at real returns. The casual condescension in Trevor's voice, the implication that Frank was some doddering old fool who didn't understand modern finance, had been breathtaking. This from a man whose car payment, rent, insurance, and cell phone bill were all covered by Frank's conservative savings account. Frank had excused himself early that night, claiming a headache. As he'd walked to his car, he'd heard Trevor's voice carrying through the open windows. I swear, the man gets more uptight every year. No wonder Eleanor divorced him. The laughter that followed, including Alyssa's distinctive giggle, had echoed in Frank's ears for weeks. That night, Frank had started a new document on his computer. Financial Dependency Analysis. He'd spent hours cataloging exactly how much of Alyssa and Trevor's lifestyle was funded by his conservative approach to money. The numbers were staggering. Over 5 years of marriage, Frank had provided $168,000 in rent payments, $29,100 in car payments, $2,400 in insurance premiums, $10,800 in cell phone bills, $34,000 for their wedding, $23,000 in emergency bailouts, $15,000 in furniture and household items. Total, $300,000. More than most people's annual salary, given freely to 2 adults who had never once expressed genuine gratitude, never made a serious attempt to become self-sufficient, and increasingly treated Frank like an obligation rather than a blessing. The grocery store incident had been the final warning sign. Frank had been shopping for his weekly groceries when he'd overheard 2 neighbors, Mrs. Harrington and Mr. Farrow, discussing local families. "Did you see Trevor's new BMW?" Mrs. Harrington had whispered. "Must be nice to have a sugar daddy father-in-law." Mr. Farrow had chuckled. "I heard from Linda Foster that Frank's still paying their rent, too. Can you imagine? At their age?" "I don't know how he stands it," Mrs. Harrington had continued. "My daughter would never expect that kind of support. It's embarrassing, really. What kind of adults can't pay their own bills?" Frank had stood frozen in the cereal aisle, realizing that his family's dysfunction had become neighborhood gossip. He wasn't just being taken advantage of privately. He was being publicly humiliated as the fool who couldn't say no to his spoiled daughter and her manipulative husband. That night, Frank had called his old friend Derek Foster, a retired lawyer who lived 3 streets over. Derek had listened to the whole story over bourbon in his living room, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Frank, you know what this is, right?" Derek had said finally. "This is financial abuse. They're using your love for Alyssa as a weapon against you." "They're family, Derek. It's complicated." "No, it's not complicated. It's simple. They take your money and give you contempt in return. That's not family. That's exploitation." Derek's words had planted a seed that grew over the following months. Frank began to notice things he'd previously overlooked. How Alyssa only called when she needed something. How Trevor's gratitude was always followed by bigger requests. How Eleanor enabled their behavior to maintain her own relationship with their daughter. The family group chat message had been the final catalyst, but the foundation for Frank's response had been building for months. As he sat in his office now, surrounded by evidence of years of financial manipulation and emotional abuse, Frank felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: clarity. His phone buzzed with another bank notification about tomorrow's automatic payments. Frank picked up his phone and, for the first time in years, began typing a response that would change everything. Frank's finger hovered over his phone screen, the cursor blinking in the family group chat text box. For 5 years, he'd absorbed their insults, their casual cruelty, their entitled demands with the patience of a man who believed family was worth any sacrifice. But something fundamental had shifted as he sat in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his own exploitation. He closed the chat app without typing a word. Instead, Frank opened his banking application and navigated to the automatic payments section. Row after row of scheduled transfers appeared on his screen, each one representing a piece of his dignity that he'd traded for the illusion of family harmony. His methodical banker's mind began calculating not just the monthly amounts, but the opportunity costs, the compound interest, the retirement security he'd sacrificed to fund 2 adults' refusal to grow up. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Frank glanced at his watch, 7:30 p.m. Through his front window, he could see Derek Foster standing on his porch, holding a bottle of bourbon and wearing the expression of a man who'd come to deliver hard truths. "I saw the neighborhood chat," Derek said without preamble as Frank opened the door. "Linda told me about the family group message. Show me." Frank led Derek to his office, handing over his phone with the family chat still open. Derek's face darkened as he scrolled through the messages, his lawyer's instincts clearly activated by what he was reading. "Jesus Christ, Frank. They really went nuclear this time." Derek set the phone down and looked around the office, taking in the organized files, the bank statements, the careful documentation. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Frank said slowly, "that maybe it's time they learned what Christmas without me actually looks like." Derek's eyebrows rose. "Meaning?" Frank pulled out the folder labeled Family Support Agreements and spread the contents across his desk. Derek whistled low as he examined the documents. Lease agreements, insurance policies, loan co-signatures, bank transfer records. "You've been documenting everything," Derek observed. 30 years in banking teaches you to keep records," Frank replied. "Every payment, every agreement, every promise they've broken. It's all here." Derek picked up a lease agreement from Alyssa and Trevor's apartment. "You're the guarantor on this?" "And the insurance policies. And Trevor's car loan." Frank's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Funny thing about being a guarantor, Derek. You have certain rights regarding payment authorization." "Frank," Derek's tone carried a warning. "What exactly are you considering?" "I'm considering," Frank said, pulling up his online banking portal, "what happens when someone who doesn't want to see me for Christmas suddenly doesn't see my money either." The 2 men sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Frank's words settling between them. Derek had known Frank for 15 years, had watched him absorb years of disrespect and financial abuse with quiet dignity. But there was something different in his friend's demeanor now, a cold calculation that Derek recognized from his own days practicing law. "They have no idea what they've just done, do they?" Derek asked. "None whatsoever." Frank clicked through his banking interface, examining each automatic payment scheduled for the next day. "They think I'm some pathetic old man who'll take any amount of abuse just to maintain contact with my daughter. They've never considered what happens if that pathetic old man decides he's had enough." Derek leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know, there's something poetic about this. They humiliate you publicly, and you respond by removing their entire financial foundation. No drama, no arguments, just consequences." "Natural consequences," Frank corrected. "They don't want me in their lives? Fine. But they don't get to keep my money while they're rejecting me." Frank's phone buzzed with a text message from Trevor. "Hey Frank, just making sure you saw the rent payment is due tomorrow. Don't let us down." The casual arrogance of the message, arriving just hours after their public humiliation of him, crystallized Frank's resolve. He showed the message to Derek, who shook his head in disbelief. "The audacity is breathtaking," Derek muttered. "They insult you in front of the entire family, then remind you to pay their bills with a winking emoji." "It's perfect timing, actually," Frank said. "Now I know they're expecting the payments to go through as usual. They have no idea what's coming." Frank opened a new document on his computer and began typing. Payment authorization revocation notice, effective immediately. Date, December 23rd. To Alyssa Dietrich Cooper, Trevor Cooper. From Franklin Dietrich. This notice serves to inform you that all automatic payments, financial support, and monetary assistance previously provided by Franklin Dietrich are hereby terminated effective immediately. This includes, but is not limited to, monthly rent payments, vehicle loan payments, insurance premiums, cell phone service, emergency financial assistance. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Any questions regarding this matter should be directed to my attorney. Derek read over Frank's shoulder as he typed. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Frank saved the document and opened his email client. But I'm not sending this until after the payments fail. Let them figure out what happened first. That's deliciously cruel, Derek observed with professional appreciation. Make them panic before they understand why. Frank began systematically canceling each automatic payment. Rent canceled, car payment canceled. Insurance canceled, cell phone canceled. Each cancellation generated a confirmation email, which Frank methodically saved to a folder labeled Financial Independence Day. What about Eleanor? Derek asked. She'll try to guilt you into reversing this. Eleanor chose her side when she laughed at me in that chat, Frank replied. She's been enabling this behavior for years, playing the cool mom while I'm cast as the uptight father who expects basic respect. Let her fund their lifestyle if she thinks my expectations are unreasonable. And Mason? Frank paused. His son had participated in the group chat mockery, but Frank sensed it was more about going along with family dynamics than genuine malice. Mason's been distant since the divorce. I think he disapproves of how Alyssa and Trevor behave, but he doesn't want to get involved in family drama. Smart man, Derek said. Stay out of the blast radius. As Frank worked through the cancellations, his phone continued buzzing with family chat notifications. He glanced at the preview messages. More jokes at his expense, planning for their Frank-free Christmas celebration, speculation about whether he was sulking or finally getting the message. They're really enjoying themselves, Derek observed, reading the notifications over Frank's shoulder. Good, Frank said. Let them enjoy it while they can. Tomorrow morning is going to be very different. Frank pulled out a small digital camera from his desk drawer, something he'd bought months ago for a photography hobby he'd never pursued. Derek, what do you know about documenting harassment? In what context? Hypothetically, if two adults who had been financially cut off were to show up at someone's house making demands and threats, would it be legal to record their behavior? Derek's smile turned predatory. In this state, absolutely. Single-party consent for audio recording and no expectation of privacy on someone else's property. If they come to your house and make a scene, you have every right to document it. And if such a recording were to be shared on social media? As long as it's truthful and recorded legally, it's protected speech, public interest in exposing bad behavior and all that. Frank nodded, setting the camera on his desk next to his phone. Just covering all my bases. Frank, you're something else, Derek said, raising his bourbon glass. You're not just cutting them off, you're setting a trap. I'm simply allowing natural consequences to occur, Frank corrected. They made their choice in that family chat. They don't want me in their lives. I'm just respecting their wishes. The two men spent the next hour going through Frank's documentation, ensuring everything was properly organized and legally sound. Derek's legal background proved invaluable as they reviewed the various agreements and contracts that Frank had signed over the years. The beautiful thing, Derek explained, is that you're not breaking any agreements. You're the guarantor, not the primary obliger. You have the right to withdraw your financial support at any time, for any reason. Or for no reason at all, Frank added. Exactly. They have no legal recourse, no way to force you to continue paying their bills. They've been living entirely on your goodwill, and goodwill can be revoked. As Derek prepared to leave, Frank walked him to the door. The neighborhood was quiet, Christmas lights twinkling in windows, families presumably gathered together in warmth and harmony. Frank felt a momentary pang of sadness for what his own family could have been, but it was quickly replaced by something stronger, anticipation. You sure about this, Frank? Derek asked at the door. Once you do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with Alyssa will never be the same. Frank looked at his friend, thinking about years of disrespect, casual cruelty, and entitled demands. He thought about the family chat, about Trevor's smirking face, about Eleanor's enabling laughter, about being treated like a walking ATM by people who were supposed to love him. Derek, Frank said quietly, what relationship? When someone tells you they don't want to see you, believe them. After Derek left, Frank returned to his office and made one final check of his work. Every payment canceled, every automatic transfer stopped, every financial lifeline severed. His phone showed 17 new messages in the family chat. More mockery, more jokes at his expense, more celebration of his exclusion. Frank turned his phone face down on his desk and opened a bottle of wine. For the first time in years, he was going to enjoy a quiet evening without worrying about his next family obligation, his next financial demand, his next opportunity to be taken for granted. Tomorrow, Alyssa and Trevor would wake up to a very different reality, and Frank would be ready with his camera when they came to discuss it. Frank woke on December 24th to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly on his nightstand. He'd slept better than he had in months. The weight of years of financial obligation finally lifted from his shoulders. The morning light filtering through his bedroom curtains felt different somehow. Cleaner, more hopeful. He checked his phone. 17 missed calls from Trevor, 12 from Alyssa, and 43 unread text messages. The family group chat showed 87 new notifications. Frank smiled and set the phone aside without reading any of them. Let them stew. Instead, he made coffee and toast, enjoying the simple pleasure of a quiet breakfast without the anxiety of wondering what financial crisis would land in his inbox today. The confirmation emails from his bank were all there, time-stamped throughout the early morning hours as various payment attempts failed. Payment declined. Insufficient authorization. Sunset Apartments rent payment. $12,800. Payment declined. Insufficient authorization. BMW Financial Services. $485. Payment declined. Insufficient authorization. Progressive Insurance. $340. Payment declined. Insufficient authorization. Verizon Wireless. $180. Frank screenshot each email, saving them to his Financial Independence Day folder. Documentation was crucial. Derek had drilled that into him last night. Every step of this process needed to be recorded, time-stamped, and legally bulletproof. His landline rang, a number almost nobody used anymore except for telemarketers and, apparently, desperate family members who'd been blocked on his cell phone. Frank let it go to voicemail, then played back the message on speaker while he ate his breakfast. "Dad, it's Alyssa. I don't know what's happening, but there's some kind of problem with our rent payment. The apartment office called Trevor at 6 a.m. saying the payment was declined. This better be some kind of bank error because our lease is at risk. Call me back immediately." The tone was classic Alyssa. No consideration that Frank might be busy, no acknowledgement of yesterday's group chat humiliation, just immediate demands and implied threats. Frank deleted the message and poured himself another cup of coffee. His cell phone rang again. This time it was Eleanor. "Frank, what the hell is going on? Alyssa called me crying about rent payments and insurance. She says you're not answering your phone." Frank answered on the fourth ring, his voice calm and pleasant. "Good morning, Eleanor. How are you?" "Don't good morning me. What's this about payment problems?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "Frank, don't play games. Alyssa and Trevor are panicking about their rent and car payments. They say everything got declined." Frank said thoughtfully. "That does sound stressful for them." There was a long pause. Frank could practically hear Eleanor's brain working, trying to figure out his angle. "Frank, did you cancel their payments?" "Eleanor, yesterday our daughter publicly told me not to come for Christmas because they don't want to see me. The whole family laughed about it. I'm simply respecting their wishes." They were just venting. You know how young people are." "Young people? Alyssa is 32. Trevor is 34. They're not children, Eleanor. Frank, be reasonable. You can't just cut them off because your feelings got hurt." Frank's grip tightened on his coffee mug. "My feelings got hurt? Eleanor, they publicly humiliated me in front of the entire extended family. They told me I wasn't welcome in their lives. I'm simply honoring that request. But their rent is their responsibility. They're adults with jobs. I'm sure they'll figure it out." Frank hung up and immediately blocked Eleanor's number. He'd had enough of her enabling, enough of being cast as the unreasonable one for expecting basic respect from his own family. Across town, Alyssa and Trevor's apartment had become a war room of panic and recrimination. Trevor paced their living room while Alyssa sat on their couch, surrounded by overdue notices and declined payment notifications. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Trevor insisted for the 20th time. "The old man's not smart enough to coordinate something like this." "It's not a mistake," Alyssa said, her voice hollow. "The apartment office confirmed that the payment authorization was revoked by the account holder. The insurance company said the same thing. So did BMW Financial." Trevor stopped pacing. "What do you mean, revoked?" "I mean, Dad deliberately canceled every payment. This isn't a bank error or a computer glitch. He did this on purpose." But that's insane. Why would he do that? Alyssa looked at her husband with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. Gee, Trevor, I wonder if it has anything to do with that group chat message I sent yesterday. That was just a joke. He knows we didn't mean it literally. Do we know that? Because right now it looks like he took it very literally. Trevor's phone rang, his boss at the real estate office. He answered with forced cheerfulness. Hey, Janet, what's up? Trevor, I just got a call from BMW Financial. They're asking about your car payment status for the Henderson property showing tomorrow. Apparently there's some kind of issue with your loan? Trevor's face went pale. In the real estate world, image was everything. Agents who couldn't manage their own finances were seen as unreliable, unprofessional. It's just a temporary banking issue. I'll have it sorted out today. Make sure you do. The Hendersons are high-value clients. We can't afford any unprofessional appearances. After Trevor hung up, he and Alyssa sat in silence, the full scope of their situation beginning to dawn on them. It wasn't just the rent and car payment, it was their entire lifestyle, their professional image, their carefully constructed adult lives that had been built on Frank's financial foundation. How much do we have in checking? Alyssa asked. Trevor checked his phone. $843. Savings? What savings? Alyssa closed her eyes. Their rent alone was $2,800. Trevor's car payment was $485. Insurance was $340. They needed nearly $4,000 just to cover this month's basic expenses, and that didn't include food, utilities, or the credit card bills that were already stretching their actual income to its limits. We have to go talk to him, Alyssa said finally. And say what? Sorry we told you we didn't want to see you, but we need your money. We say it was a misunderstanding, a joke that went too far. We apologize and promise it won't happen again. Trevor nodded eagerly. Right. We explained that we were just stressed about the holidays, maybe had a little too much wine when we were texting. He'll understand. But even as they planned their approach, both Alyssa and Trevor felt a growing unease. They'd known Frank as the quiet, reliable provider who absorbed their disrespect with resigned patience. This calculated, systematic response was something entirely different, something that suggested they'd fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. Meanwhile, Frank was having lunch at the downtown coffee shop where he'd met Derek the night before. His phone continued buzzing with calls and texts, but he'd put it on silent and placed it face down on the table. Derek arrived precisely at noon, carrying a manila folder and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who'd spent the morning researching legal precedents. How's your morning been? Derek asked, sliding into the booth across from Frank. Peaceful, Frank replied. 17 missed calls from Trevor, 12 from Alyssa, and Eleanor tried to guilt me into reversing everything. And I blocked Eleanor's number and haven't responded to any of them. Derek opened his folder and pulled out several printed documents. I spent the morning reviewing your situation from a legal standpoint. The good news is you're completely in the clear. Every payment you canceled was voluntary financial support with no legal obligation to continue. What about the lease guarantor situation? That's where it gets interesting. As the guarantor, you're still technically responsible if they default on rent, but you also have the right to demand immediate possession of the property or removal of your guarantee with 30 days' notice. Frank raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning you could legally evict them if you wanted to. The lease gives you that right as the financial guarantor. I don't want to evict them. I just want them to understand that financial support comes with basic respect. Fair enough, but it's good to know you have options if they escalate this situation. Derek pulled out another document. I also researched the recording laws we discussed. Single-party consent, no expectation of privacy on your property. If they show up at your house making demands or threats, you're legally clear to record everything. Frank nodded, thinking about the camera he'd set up near his front door that morning. What about social media? As long as the recording is legal and truthful, you can share it anywhere you want. First Amendment protection for documenting bad behavior. They spent the next hour going over various scenarios and Frank's legal position in each one. Derek's thoroughness was reassuring. Whatever happened next, Frank would be prepared and protected. As they prepared to leave, Derek's expression grew serious. Frank, I have to ask, are you prepared for the possibility that this destroys your relationship with Alyssa permanently? Frank considered the question while putting on his coat. Derek, what relationship? When did we last have a conversation that wasn't about money? When did she last call just to see how I was doing? When did she last show any genuine interest in my life, my thoughts, my feelings? Never, Derek admitted. Exactly. I'm not destroying a relationship. I'm just refusing to continue funding my own abuse. Frank drove home through his quiet suburban neighborhood, noting the Christmas decorations and family gatherings visible through lit windows. For years, those scenes had made him feel lonely, isolated, like a failure as a father and husband. Today, they looked peaceful and authentic, the kind of family harmony that couldn't be bought or coerced, only earned through mutual respect and genuine affection. Back in his office, Frank reviewed the day's documentation. Screenshots of declined payments, saved voicemails, text message logs, legal research from Derek, everything organized, time-stamped, and filed appropriately. His doorbell rang at 4:30 p.m. Frank checked his security camera and saw a delivery truck. The driver handed him a large envelope marked urgent with his name written in Alyssa's handwriting. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter. Dad, I don't understand what's happening or why you're doing this to us. The group chat thing was just family teasing. You know we didn't mean anything serious by it. We're all stressed about the holidays, and sometimes people say things they don't mean. But cutting off our rent and car payments? That's extreme, Dad. We could lose our apartment. Trevor could lose his job if his car gets repossessed. Is that really what you want? To destroy our lives over a misunderstanding? I know you're hurt, but this is not the way to handle family problems. We should talk about this like adults, not play these kinds of games with people's lives and security. Please call me. Please fix this. We can work through whatever is bothering you, but not if you're going to hold our basic needs hostage. Love, Alyssa Frank read the letter twice, noting the careful language designed to minimize their behavior while maximizing his responsibility. Family teasing. Misunderstanding. Games. No acknowledgement of the deliberate cruelty of their group chat message, no recognition of years of entitled behavior, no genuine apology for the public humiliation, just demands wrapped in manipulation and emotional blackmail. Frank folded the letter and placed it in his filing cabinet, then returned to his computer. It was time to prepare for tomorrow's inevitable confrontation. Because if he knew his daughter and son-in-law at all, they wouldn't be content with letters and phone calls much longer. They would be coming to his door, and when they did, Frank would be ready. Christmas Eve evening settled over Frank's neighborhood like a blanket of deceptive peace. Through his office window, he could see families gathering in warm, lit homes, the kind of Norman Rockwell scenes that had once filled him with longing for what his own family could have been. Tonight, those images brought only a quiet satisfaction. He was no longer chasing an impossible dream of family harmony built on his own diminishment. Frank's phone had finally stopped buzzing around 6 p.m. After accumulating over 200 missed calls and text messages throughout the day. He'd glanced at a few of the message previews. Trevor. Frank, this is insane. You're going to ruin our lives. Alyssa. Dad, please just call me back. We need to talk about this. Eleanor. I never thought you could be this cruel to your own daughter. Mason. Hey, Dad. Heard there's some family drama. You okay? The last message gave Frank pause. Mason, his quiet, distant son who'd participated in yesterday's group chat mockery, was the only one asking about Frank's well-being rather than demanding he fix their problems. Frank made a mental note to call Mason after this situation resolved. Perhaps there was still one family relationship worth salvaging. Derek had stopped by around 7 p.m. to help Frank set up his documentation system. They'd positioned a high-definition camera with audio recording capability near the front door, angled to capture both the porch and driveway. Frank's smartphone was charged and ready as a backup recording device. Every angle covered, every legal requirement met. You know, Derek said as they tested the camera setup, in 30 years of practicing law, I've seen a lot of family financial disputes, but I've never seen someone prepare for the confrontation quite this methodically. 30 years in banking teaches you to document everything, Frank replied, adjusting the camera angle. Besides, if I'm going to be accused of destroying their lives, I want people to see exactly how they respond when their free ride ends. Derek pulled out a manila folder and handed it to Frank. Speaking of documentation, I prepared these for you. Frank opened the folder to find several official-looking documents. Notice of financial support, termination lease, guarantor rights and responsibilities, summary recording consent and privacy law. Overview, social media publication, legal guidelines, everything you need to stay legally protected, Derek explained. The termination notice makes it official. You're not just canceling payments, you're formally ending all financial support. If they try to claim this was temporary or a misunderstanding, this document proves otherwise. Frank reviewed the termination notice, noting Derek's precise legal language. 2. Alyssa Dietrich Cooper and Trevor Cooper, from Franklin Dietrich. Date, December 24th. This notice serves as formal notification that all financial support previously provided by Franklin Dietrich is hereby permanently terminated, effective immediately. This termination is based on irreconcilable differences regarding mutual respect and family relationships. No further financial assistance will be provided for any purpose, including but not limited to housing, transportation, insurance, telecommunications, or emergency expenses. This decision is final and non-negotiable. When should I serve this? Frank asked. After they show up tomorrow, Derek advised. Let them make their demands, record their behavior, then hand them the official notice. Maximum impact. They spent another hour reviewing Frank's legal position and potential scenarios. Derek's thoroughness was both reassuring and slightly ominous. Clearly, he expected tomorrow's confrontation to be significant enough to require extensive legal protection. After Derek left, Frank prepared his house for what he'd begun thinking of as Independence Day. He organized all his financial documents in clearly labeled folders, charged his electronic devices, and even prepared a thermos of coffee for what might be a long morning of documentation. At 9 p.m., his doorbell rang. Frank checked his security camera and saw Alyssa and Trevor standing on his porch, both looking haggard and desperate. Alyssa was crying, her makeup smeared, and her usual polished appearance replaced by the frantic energy of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. Trevor stood beside her, his jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists. Frank didn't answer the door. "Dad, I know you're in there," Alyssa called out, her voice cracking. "Your car's in the driveway and all the lights are on. Please, we just need to talk." Trevor stepped closer to the door. "Frank, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Open the door so we can discuss this like adults." Frank remained in his office, watching the security camera feed on his computer monitor. The irony of Trevor calling him childish while standing on his porch demanding money after publicly humiliating him was not lost on Frank. "We're not leaving until you talk to us," Alyssa shouted, her desperation becoming more apparent. "We can't afford rent. Trevor's car payment is due. You're going to make us homeless over a stupid text message." Frank noted the language. A stupid text message. Still minimizing, still refusing to acknowledge the deliberate cruelty of their behavior. The pounding on his door intensified. Trevor's voice grew louder and more hostile. "Frank, open the door. You can't hide in there forever." Frank picked up his phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" "This is Franklin Dietrich at 1247 Maple Street. I have 2 people on my property who are refusing to leave and making threats. I've asked them to leave, and they've refused." "Are you in immediate danger, sir?" "I don't believe so, but they are becoming increasingly aggressive, and I'm concerned about property damage." "We'll send an officer to your location." Frank hung up and continued watching the security feed. Alyssa and Trevor were now arguing with each other on his porch, their voices carrying clearly through the night air. "This is your fault," Alyssa hissed at Trevor. "I told you that group chat message was too much, but you kept encouraging everyone to pile on." "My fault? You're the one who wrote it. I just thought it was funny." "Well, it's not funny now, is it? We're about to lose everything because you can't control your mouth." Frank was recording everything, of course. Their admission that the group chat message was deliberate, their blame shifting, their complete focus on their own problems rather than any genuine remorse for hurting him. All of it captured in high-definition audio and video. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Frank watched through his camera as Officer Martinez approached Alyssa and Trevor, who immediately launched into frantic explanations about family misunderstandings and communication problems. Frank opened his front door and stepped onto the porch. "Good evening, Officer Martinez," Frank said calmly. "Thank you for responding so quickly." "Mr. Dietrich, these folks say they're your family and they just want to talk to you." "They are my daughter and son-in-law," Frank confirmed, "but I've made it clear that I don't wish to speak with them tonight. They've been on my property for over 20 minutes, making demands and refusing to leave when asked." Alyssa stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, please, we just need 5 minutes to explain." "Ma'am," Officer Martinez interrupted gently, "if Mr. Dietrich has asked you to leave his property, you need to respect that request. Family or not, this is still trespassing." Trevor's face flushed red. "This is insane. He's our family. We have a right to talk to him." "Actually, sir, you don't," Officer Martinez replied. "Mr. Dietrich has the right to control who comes onto his property. If he doesn't want to speak with you, that's his choice." Frank watched his daughter's face crumple as the reality of the situation sank in. For the first time in years, she was facing consequences that couldn't be solved with tears, manipulation, or demands for his financial intervention. "Officer," Frank said quietly, "I don't want to press charges. I just want them to leave my property and not return tonight." "You heard him," Officer Martinez said to Alyssa and Trevor. "You need to leave now, and you can't come back tonight. If you do, Mr. Dietrich can have you arrested for trespassing." As Alyssa and Trevor reluctantly walked to their car, Alyssa turned back one last time. Dad, we'll be back tomorrow. We're not giving up on this. Frank nodded politely. That's your choice, Alyssa, but my decision stands. After they drove away and Officer Martinez left, Frank returned to his office and reviewed the evening's recordings. Everything was clear, well lit, and legally obtained. Alyssa's admission that the group chat message was deliberate. Trevor's aggressive demands. Their complete focus on their financial problems rather than any genuine remorse. Perfect documentation for tomorrow's confrontation. Frank poured himself a glass of wine and sat in his living room, looking out at the Christmas lights twinkling throughout his neighborhood. Tomorrow would bring the final act of this family drama, and he was as ready as any man could be. His phone buzzed with one last text message of the night from Mason in Seattle. Dad, I don't know what's going on with Alyssa and Trevor, but I wanted you to know that group chat thing yesterday was messed up. You didn't deserve that. Hope you're okay. Frank smiled and typed back, Thank you, son. That means more than you know. We'll talk soon. Perhaps some family relationships were worth salvaging after all. But tomorrow, Frank would deal with the ones that weren't. He set his alarm for 6 a.m., charged his camera equipment one final time, and went to bed with the peaceful sleep of a man who had finally stopped enabling his own abuse. Tomorrow was Independence Day. Frank woke at dawn on Christmas morning to the sound of car doors slamming in his driveway. He checked his bedside clock, 6:47 a.m., then glanced at his security camera feed. Alyssa, Trevor, and Eleanor were marching toward his front door with the grim determination of a military assault team. All three looked like they'd slept poorly, if at all. Frank smiled and reached for his phone, starting the recording app before they could even ring the doorbell. The pounding began immediately. Not the polite knocking of visitors, but the aggressive hammering of people who felt entitled to his attention. Frank put on his robe, grabbed his backup recording device, and walked calmly to his front door. He did not open it. Dad! Alyssa's voice was already shrill with desperation. Open this door right now. We need to talk. Frank, this is Eleanor. Stop being ridiculous and let us in. We know you're awake, Trevor shouted. Your lights are on, and we saw you moving around in there. Frank positioned himself near the door where his voice would be clearly audible through the wood, but remained safely inside his home. Good morning, Alyssa. Good morning, Eleanor. Good morning, Trevor. How can I help you? You can help us by opening this goddamn door and explaining what the hell you think you're doing. Trevor's voice cracked with barely controlled rage. I'm not sure what you mean, Frank replied calmly. I'm simply respecting your wishes from the family group chat. You said you didn't want to see me for Christmas. I'm honoring that request. That was a joke, Alyssa screamed, her voice breaking. You know it was a joke. People say things when they're stressed. It didn't seem like a joke when everyone was laughing about it, Frank observed. It seemed like a pretty clear statement of your feelings. Eleanor stepped closer to the door. Frank, be the bigger person here. You're the adult. You're the father. Fix this. I am being the adult, Eleanor. Adults face consequences for their actions. Adults pay their own bills. Adults treat family members with basic respect. We lost our apartment, Trevor shouted. The landlord gave us 24 hours to pay or we're out. Is that what you want? To make your own daughter homeless? Frank's voice remained steady. I want my daughter to be a self-sufficient adult who treats her family with respect. If you can't afford your apartment without my money, perhaps you should find one you can afford with your own income. The pounding intensified. Frank could hear Alyssa sobbing now, her careful makeup probably streaking down her face as the reality of her situation became undeniable. Dad, please, she wailed. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about the group chat. I was just frustrated and I said something stupid. Please don't destroy our lives over one mistake. One mistake? Frank's voice carried clearly through the door. Alyssa, this isn't about one message. This is about years of treating me like a walking ATM. This is about taking my money while giving me nothing but contempt in return. That's not true. But even as Alyssa said it, her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you showed any interest in my life that wasn't connected to money? Silence from the other side of the door. When was the last time you said thank you for anything I've provided? When was the last time Trevor spoke to me with anything resembling respect? More silence, broken only by Alyssa's muffled sobs. Eleanor's voice took on the manipulative tone Frank remembered from their marriage. Frank, this isn't about you. This is about family. This is about doing what's right. You're absolutely correct, Eleanor. This is about doing what's right. And what's right is refusing to enable two adults who think cruelty and entitlement are acceptable ways to treat family. But they're going to lose everything, Eleanor pleaded. Then maybe they'll learn to appreciate what they had, Frank replied. Maybe they'll learn that actions have consequences. Maybe they'll learn to be grateful instead of entitled. Trevor's voice returned, louder and more aggressive. Frank, you're being a petty old man. This is pathetic. You're destroying your relationship with your daughter because your feelings got hurt. My feelings got hurt? Frank's voice sharpened slightly. Trevor, you've spent 5 years taking my money while treating me like a joke. You've made fun of my age, my values, my conservative approach to money, the same conservative approach that's been funding your entire lifestyle. That's not... Last month you called me someone who ruins the mood at Mason's birthday dinner. You've mocked my investment advice while asking me to cover your gambling debts. You've treated me like an ATM with legs, and now you're surprised that the ATM has stopped dispensing cash? Frank could hear them arguing among themselves now, their voices carrying clearly in the crisp morning air. He glanced at his security camera feed and saw that neighbors were beginning to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Harrington from across the street was openly recording with her phone. Mr. Farrow had come out to get his newspaper and was lingering on his porch, clearly listening to every word. Perfect. Dad, please, Alyssa tried again, her voice hoarse from crying. I know we haven't been perfect, but we're family. Family forgives each other. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right, Alyssa. Family does help each other. But help flows both ways. Respect flows both ways. Love flows both ways. What you've been describing isn't family. It's a one-way transaction where I provide money and you provide contempt. We don't provide contempt. Really? Do I need to pull up the group chat again? Should I bring up Trevor calling me a mood wrecker? Or tally how often you dismissed my old-fashioned advice while still taking my money? Frank pulled out Derek's formal termination notice and slid it under the door. What's this? He heard Eleanor ask. That's a formal notice of financial support termination, Frank explained. Every payment, every bailout, every financial assistance, it's all permanently ended. This isn't a temporary punishment or a negotiating tactic. This is a permanent change in our relationship. You can't be serious. Trevor's voice was hollow with shock. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. The crying intensified. Frank could hear Alyssa hyperventilating, Eleanor trying to comfort her, Trevor cursing under his breath. Through his security camera, he could see that more neighbors had emerged. The morning drama was becoming a neighborhood spectacle. Dad, what do you want us to do? Alyssa's voice was barely a whisper now. What do you want us to say? I don't want you to say anything, Alyssa. I want you to grow up. I want you to take responsibility for your own lives. I want you to learn that treating people with cruelty has consequences. But we'll lose everything. Then you'll learn to rebuild with your own resources. You'll learn to live within your means. You'll learn to be grateful for what you earn instead of entitled to what others provide. Frank could see through his camera that a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Mrs. Harrington was still recording, and several other neighbors had their phones out. The Christmas morning drama was being documented from multiple angles. Frank, Eleanor's voice took on a commanding tone. Open this door right now. Stop hiding behind a piece of wood like a coward. I'm not hiding, Eleanor. I'm protecting myself from people who have repeatedly demonstrated that they don't respect boundaries, don't appreciate generosity, and don't understand the concept of consequences. This is insane, Trevor exploded. You're a bitter old man who can't handle a little family teasing. You're destroying lives because you're too fragile to take a joke. A joke? Frank's voice carried clearly to the growing crowd of neighbors. Trevor, let me make sure I understand. Telling me not to come for Christmas because you don't want to see me, that was a joke? Yes. And everyone laughing at that message. That was part of the joke? It was just family banter. I see. And when you referred to me as someone who drags down the mood at Mason's birthday dinner, was that supposed to be a joke too? Silence. When you mocked my investment advice while asking me to cover your cryptocurrency losses, was that a joke too? More silence. When you told your coworkers that the old man will cover it, he always does, was that part of your comedy routine? Frank could see Trevor's face go pale through the security camera. He hadn't realized Frank knew about that particular comment. Here's what I think, Trevor. I think you've been treating me like a joke for years, and now you're shocked to discover that the joke is over. The pounding on the door resumed, more frantic now. Dad, please. Alyssa was sobbing openly. I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll pay you back. Alyssa, stop. Frank's voice was gentle but firm. This isn't about apologies or promises or dramatic gestures. This is about natural consequences. You made a choice about how to treat me. I'm making a choice about how to respond. But we're your family. Family is more than shared DNA, Alyssa. Family is about love, respect, mutual support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. What we've had for the last 5 years isn't family. It's a financial arrangement where I pay for the privilege of being disrespected. Frank could see through his camera that the crowd of neighbors had grown to nearly a dozen people. Multiple phones were recording, and he could see people sharing the videos in real time on social media. The Christmas morning meltdown was going viral in his own neighborhood. "That's it," Trevor announced. "I'm done with this. Frank, you want to play hardball? Fine. We'll see how you feel when Alyssa never speaks to you again. We'll see how you feel when you never meet your grandchildren. We'll see how you feel when you're old and alone and need help." Frank's response was calm and measured. "Trevor, you just threatened to withhold my daughter and potential grandchildren unless I continue funding your lifestyle. Do you understand what that makes you?" "What?" "It makes you someone who uses family relationships as leverage for financial gain. It makes you someone who treats love as a commodity to be bought and sold. It makes you exactly the kind of person I no longer choose to enable." The silence that followed was deafening. Even through the door, Frank could sense that Trevor's threat had backfired spectacularly, revealing the transactional nature of their relationship in the starkest possible terms. Eleanor tried one last time. "Frank, please, think about what you're doing. Think about the family. Think about Christmas." "I am thinking about Christmas, Eleanor. I'm thinking about how peaceful it's going to be without people who only want to see me when they need money. I'm thinking about how nice it will be to spend the holiday with people who actually care about my well-being instead of my bank account." Frank walked to his front window and opened the blinds, making eye contact with Alyssa through the glass. Her makeup was completely ruined, her hair disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled from her desperate attempts to get his attention. She looked like exactly what she was, a spoiled adult having a public meltdown because her free ride had ended. "Goodbye, Alyssa," Frank said clearly, his voice carrying to the crowd of neighbors. "When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect instead of financial dependence, you know where to find me." He closed the blinds and went back inside, watching through the security camera as the truth finally sank in. They weren't going to guilt, manipulate, or threaten him into resuming their payments. Their free ride was over. Frank opened his laptop and uploaded the morning's recordings. The footage was clear, legal, and unfiltered. Every plea, demand, and threat captured in high definition. He titled the first video, "When you tell your family you don't want to see them for Christmas, but still expect them to pay your bills." The views climbed fast, dozens in minutes, hundreds in an hour, over 60,000 by noon. The comments poured in, calling out the entitlement, praising Frank for standing his ground, and condemning the threats involving grandchildren. Reading them, Frank felt a weight lift. Years of doubt vanished. Strangers confirmed what he'd always known. His family's behavior was unacceptable, and his response was necessary. Derek called, impressed by the growing numbers and the reaction. "You struck a nerve," he said. "For the first time in years," Frank replied, looking out at the now empty street. "I feel like myself again." When the call ended, the views were nearing 70,000 and spreading fast. The meltdown was turning into a viral lesson on entitlement and consequences. Frank closed his laptop, poured a coffee, and sat in the quiet of Christmas morning. No anxiety, no demands, no looming crises, just peace. His phone showed 75,000 views and climbing. Somewhere his family was realizing the world had seen everything. Frank turned the phone off and smiled. He had Christmas to enjoy.